A mountainous wave rears out of the December darkness and slams into the base of a lighthouse perched on sheer black rock. Spray bursts higher than the lantern room itself. Somewhere below, 3 men who tend this light have vanished, and no one will ever say for certain why. Rewind 3 weeks. The Flannan Isles lie 20 miles west of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, a scatter of uninhabited rock in the North Atlantic. In 1900, the Northern Lighthouse Board completed a new light there, meant to guide ships through one of Scotland's most treacherous stretches of sea. 3 keepers manned the station on rotation. James Ducat, the principal keeper, experienced and steady. Thomas Marshall, his assistant, and Donald Macarthur, filling in for a keeper on leave. They lived in isolation for weeks at a time, resupplied only when weather allowed a boat to land. The Flannans had a fearsome reputation long before the lighthouse existed. Local shepherds who grazed sheep there refused to spend the night, believing the islands were haunted. Sailors called them the Seven Hunters and gave the rocks a wide, respectful berth. On the 15th of December, 1900, the steamer Arctur passed the islands at night and noticed something wrong. The great light, which should have swept the darkness, was not burning. The captain reported it once he reached port, but rough seas delayed any response for days. It was not until the 26th of December that the relief vessel Hesperus could finally approach. The sea remained violent, and the crew struggled to bring their boat alongside the landing stage. What they found waiting on shore troubled them before they even climbed the rock. No flag had been raised to greet them, no signal given, though the keepers always watched for the relief boat. The flagstaff stood bare. As the men climbed toward the lighthouse, an unnatural stillness settled over the entire island. Inside the lighthouse, the front door was closed but unlocked. The clock had stopped. 2 of the 3 oilskin coats and boots, gear the keepers always wore outdoors in bad weather, were missing from their pegs. The 1 coat remained, hanging exactly where it had been left. In the kitchen, a chair lay overturned on the floor. A meal sat half-eaten on the table, plates and cups left exactly as they had been, as if the men had simply stood up mid-bite and never returned. The last log entries offered no warning of what was to come. The lighthouse logbook, kept faithfully by the keepers, painted a picture of mounting unease. On the 12th of December, an entry described a storm of extraordinary violence. Ducat himself noted that Macarthur, a hardened man, had been crying. The final entry, dated the 15th of December, simply noted that the storm had passed and the sea was calm. That single detail would trouble investigators for generations, because it directly contradicted what came next: a catastrophic wave on a day the keepers themselves called calm. The relief crew searched every room, every outbuilding, every inch of the small island. There was no trace of Ducat, Marshall, or Macarthur. No bodies were ever recovered. Then, or in the years that followed, the 3 men had simply ceased to exist. Investigators turned to the West Landing, the side of the island that faced the open Atlantic and bore the full force of incoming storms. There, the evidence grew stranger still. Iron railings meant to protect the path had been torn away, twisted as if by tremendous force. A wooden box that had stored ropes and tools, positioned well above the normal reach of the sea, had been ripped from its mountings and hurled a considerable distance. Whatever forces struck that shore were powerful enough to move iron and timber alike. The official investigation, led by Robert Muirhead of the Northern Lighthouse Board, concluded that the most likely explanation was drowning. He believed the men had gone to secure equipment at the West Landing during a lull, and a sudden freak wave had swept 2 of them into the sea. Under this theory, the 3rd keeper, seeing his companions in danger, ran out without his coat to help, and was caught by a second wave before he could return. It was plausible, consistent with the missing oilskins, the overturned chair, the abandoned meal. Yet the official log's final note, describing calm seas on the day of the disappearance, does not fit neatly with a rogue wave large enough to sweep away 3 grown men and tear iron from stone. The contradiction has never been resolved. Because the truth was never confirmed, speculation filled the silence almost immediately. Some pointed to sea serpents or foreign spies, tales that spread quickly through newspapers eager for a sensational story about the empty lighthouse in the Atlantic. Others whispered darker possibilities, that one keeper, driven to violence by isolation, had harmed the others before being lost himself. There was no physical evidence for this, only the unsettling knowledge that 3 men had lived alone together in a place the shepherds themselves refused to sleep. A poem published years later, though fictionalized, cemented the eerie image of the abandoned table in the public imagination. A half-eaten meal left forever waiting for men who would not return. Fiction and fact began to blur, as they often do with mysteries this complete. The Northern Lighthouse Board itself dismissed the wilder theories. Muirhead's report, grounded in physical evidence at the West Landing, remains the closest thing to an official answer. A sudden, catastrophic wave, and men caught in the wrong place at the worst possible moment. Yet, Muirhead's own report noted troubling details he could not fully explain. The missing coat suggested one man left in haste without protection, an oddity if the danger was already obvious to all 3. Small inconsistencies like this have kept the case open in the minds of historians. Modern meteorologists have since studied the region's wave patterns and confirmed that the Flannan Isles are indeed vulnerable to extreme, sudden waves generated by distant Atlantic storms, waves that can strike with little local warning even on a seemingly calmer sea. This science lends real weight to the drowning theory, suggesting the calm entry in the log may have simply preceded a wave born far out at sea, arriving without any local sign until it was already too late. The lighthouse itself was restored to service within weeks, automated eventually, and still stands today, its light still sweeping the same dark water. But for over a century, no new physical evidence has emerged to settle the matter conclusively, one way or the other. Families of the 3 keepers were left with only questions. Ducat left behind a wife and children. Marshall was young, only in his 20s. Macarthur had been a last-minute replacement, standing in for another man entirely, and paid for it with everything. Every December since, the anniversary of the disappearance draws renewed attention to the case. New theories published, old evidence re-examined, yet always circling back to the same unresolved core. 3 careful, experienced men vanished from a locked, isolated post without a trace. The Flannan Isles remain uninhabited today, visited only occasionally by researchers and the rare passing boat. The lighthouse still turns, fully automated now, needing no keepers at all, its light warning ships away from the very rocks that once claimed the men who tended it. What happened in those final hours on the West Landing may never be fully known. The sea that took James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald Macarthur kept it secret, and has offered nothing more since. Not a body, not a relic, not a final word. Perhaps that is the true weight of the Flannan Isles mystery. Not the theories, but the absence at its center. 3 men who kept a light burning for others vanished into darkness themselves, and the ocean around their empty lighthouse has never once explained why.